Well, we will get started. Thanks for rushing back here, Ryan. Today, we wanted to discuss standards-based grading and try to make sure that we are all on the same page with standards-based grading. So, a few things in this slideshow, just giving you our agenda. We're going to start with just really understanding what it is and then move into why. Because I feel like that's a big part of standards-based grading is understanding why we do it. So I did throw some love and logic in here because I brought love and logic to you guys last time, and I'm sure you can tell, but it's something that I truly believe in, and that changed my classroom. So I wanted to give you some tips on their approach to grades, to helping students with their grades, since that's what we're focusing on. And obviously, it's about building those positive relationships. And I really like the little tips that they give here, just some talking points for you. And Dr. Reed has set up a resource section for teachers in the Media Center, and I am so excited about it. So she actually has Love and Logic in the library in the Media Center for you to check out. I think she might have multiple copies. If she doesn't, I know that she is considering ordering more copies, but I did send you that free download, and it still works. It still works because I looked at it the other day, so it's still there. But I really appreciate, we know a lot of our students struggle with their grades and struggle with academics, and just giving us some talking points that we might not already be thinking about when we're having discussions with children. And I really like just the tips that they have here. The simple, I believe in you so much that I feel the need to nag you. And just telling them, phrasing it like that, because I know students are like, you're always on my case. And I'm like, it's because I love you. It's because I'm here because I love you. And then, of course, they smile and eye roll, and they're like, okay, fine, leave me alone, go away, I'll do my work. And it's just rephrasing how we approach their grades instead of just, you're not working. You're not doing what you need to do. We need to fix this. And try to avoid consistent punishments for not performing academically or not performing in general. And I still have students that really struggle with focusing or completing tasks as well. But these are just some of the talking points that they had. Again, we want our students to struggle. We want them to also feel what achievement feels like as well, and accomplishment. And then this is another chart that they had in the book. And it is just to help us reach those students and understanding, again, going back to standards-based grading, that when our students are underachieving, there's a reason for it. And that's a part of understanding the philosophy behind it. And to be honest, just to share my experience with standards-based grading, I was unfamiliar to it before I came to Rossville. So some of you might be in the same shoes that I was in when I came, and I remember Mr. Pelham introducing me to the idea in this room, and I was like, well, wait, so how am I going to get them to do the work? How am I going, if they're and I remember having that moment being like, wait, they're not graded for everything that it blew my mind at first. But then when I learned about it, I realized how much it connected to my teaching philosophy that I didn't really understand before. And it's all about student success and helping our students achieve that, and that their grades reflect that, and that is true to them. But just keeping these little things in mind, when that the brain filters out information when our students' needs are not met, they're going to struggle. And so it's really considering that and keeping that in our brains as we're trying to teach them. And when this happens, there are things that successful educators do, and they focus on heavy building of relationships. Of course, that's something that we already know. And when a student isn't working, really trying to approach them individually and not as a group, and letting them know that you're here to help them, and letting them know that you believe in them, and avoid those power struggles by focusing on guiding the student to solve their own problems rather than making the problem their own. And then they focus on the student's strengths so that the student might be willing to try things that are difficult. So really focusing on what they're good at and highlighting that to them. And that's a part of standards-based grading. And when they actually master that grade, letting them know, like, you did that. Like, you did that. And so that's why I feel like there's so much power in it that I didn't understand before, that I held on to that struggle when I came here of, they're not going to work if they're not getting a grade for it. And I realized it was changing my way of thinking that then impacted them. And so what is standards-based grading? Obviously, Rob is the king of, I guess, is that your title? Is it official somewhere?
Chancellor.
Oh, okay, excuse me. How am I going?
I'm going to take over the screen real quick.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to make this presentation available to you guys. It's like 90 pages long. Trust me, there's like 12 of them are a comic strip, so it goes real fast. But normally with stuff like this, I don't like to get very theoretical with you, but I think to understand why we approach it this way, I need to get a little theoretical for a minute, and then we'll talk about some mechanics of how it works here. We piloted standards-based grading here at Rossville Middle in 2006, 2007. We were the very first school to do it in Walker County. It was actually in my classroom with Jesse Lawrence, who's one of the great co-teachers of all time. And it really, we just kind of stumbled on it. This isn't something that you don't really find studies on assessment practices, because pretty much we've uncritically been taught how to grade in our preparation programs, and standards-based grading is really a rather new thing academically. It's only about 20 years old. And those of you who've been in education for a while know the names like Deborah Pickering and Robert Marzano. Those are big, big names. And they are really the champions of it. We have several copies of what we call the Green Book in the Media Center in the teacher section. And I've got like hundreds of those. If you want your own copy to write in, I will be happy to. That is the SVG Bible. But this is something that we're really, really passionate about. I just want you to understand why we do it, because at first, when you're first encountered with it, like Hannah was, it might seem strange or odd, but when you start to think about it, it's really intuitive. I have 4 different kids, a 22-year-old, a 21-year-old, a 7th grader here, and a 4-year-old. And they're all different people. They're all different. I treat them differently, not because I'm inconsistent, but because they need to be treated differently according to their nature. And that really is the basis of why we do SVG, because kids are different. That's why. All right, so I'm going to run through this rather quickly. If you need to stop me or interject, please do. Just let this be a conversation, okay? Now, I might throw some things up there that really challenge something you might hold dear. I think if I can bring anything to the table as an instructional leader, it's that I don't think that anything is sacred when it comes to this. I think this is all worth challenging, everything that we do. So we have been given a lot of flexibility because of this great teacher right here who articulated this in a panel of Teachers of the Year, the best of the best. She stood out, and because of that, when it came to assessment, Mr. Wright's like, this is what we want our district to do, but we're leaving Rossville Middle alone. What they're doing is special, it's unique, it's good, so we're not touching it, and that's because of her. So, let me go through this real quick. Let me talk about the basic purpose of assessment. Why do we do grading in the first place? What's the whole point of getting a grade? Now, historically, in public education, grades have been given for a number of reasons. Some of them, well, most of them not good, one of them really good. And the first is grades have been used as motivational tools, or presumably. A low grade is an incentive to improve, and a high grade is a motivation to continue efforts. You've had grades that have been used as behavioral tools, right? If you bring in Kleenexes or a can for the canned food drive, you're going to get extra points. If you are neat, you're going to get extra points. If you're late, I'm taking points away. That kind of thing. So grades have been used as behavioral tools. Grades have been as administrative tools. They've been used to position students, especially at the high school level, for class rankings, for ability grouping. I don't think that is a poor use of assessment. I think using that for informational purposes is valid. But the key is, what is the information that we want to extract from grading? What, so that's where the rubber meets the road. This is from the Marzano Green Book, the Bible, this quote. This is the best definition of what a grade is, okay? Grades are feedback to the learner on the degree to which he or she has the knowledge and standards, benchmark indicators, learning, etc., at a particular point in time. So a grade should communicate to you, to the student, and to the student's parents, that student's level of content mastery at any given point in time. Grading is not used, now it can be a learning tool, and I'll show you why here in a minute. But it's not meant to, when we first put this out, it was like, this is socialism, it means everybody's going to pass. And I said, no. Feedback does help students improve, but that's not the point. People have been failing under classical assessment for years and years and years, and people will fail under standards-based grading too, because its point is to communicate a piece of information, and that information is that student's level of content mastery, and that is it. Only their mastery. There are other ways to communicate things like citizenship or work ethic or that kind of thing, but the grade should be the symbol that represents the level of mastery. All right, so that's the gold standard of definitions here. So let's start with some premises. Here's where I'm going to get a little theoretical for a couple minutes, okay? Feedback is, premise one, feedback is the most important factor in improving student achievement. There is a Hattie and Temperley meta-analysis. It is the study of all studies that's ever been done on assessment. It's listed in that green book that I have, the manual. And what they do is they rate factors in student achievement. You've got things like instructional technology, literacy, all these different factors. By far, I'm talking like standard deviations above number 2 is feedback. Like I'm communicating to that kid where his level of mastery is, or that kid is giving himself critical feedback. Like I know where I'm at, I know where I stand over against the standard. That's the first premise. Premise number 2. The most important function of grading and assessment is to provide students with feedback regarding their progress towards content mastery. Okay, so it's not just that feedback is the important factor. It can't just be bland feedback, like, oh, great job, man, good job, Maggie. It's got to be pointed, targeted feedback, like, on this element, you got it. On this element, you're weak, okay? So students have to know specifically where their weak areas or where their areas for growth are, all right? So that's premise number 2. Premise number 3, this is the key, and we are all guilty of this, me included. We've all done this because teachers are good. Public education is better than it's ever been. It's really good at Rossville Middle School. But teachers only know to do what they know to do, right? If you haven't been presented something, it's like it's like a tiger eating vegetables. Can they eat vegetables? Yes, they could. They could survive, but they're carnivores. They don't conceive of anything else but this. So we have always used grading in a traditional way. Broadly speaking, we have our unit, we've got our number of assignments, we weight our assignments in different ways according to how important they are. Like a classwork thing might be weighted once, a test might be weighted 3 times, a big project might be weighted 5 times or whatever. We add it all up, we get an average, and boom, that's their grade for the unit. Now we go on to the next unit. That's how we've done it, right? Well, anytime any other factor, work ethic, behavior, citizenship, anytime those things influence grade reporting, suddenly you realize that the only thing that grade now cannot communicate is mastery. Like if I start using a grade as a means to weigh work ethic or citizenship, now I can communicate those things with that symbol. But the one thing I can't communicate is the one thing I should be communicating, and that is content mastery. That's why it's very important that grade reflect only that piece of information. So that's premise number 3. Common defects in current practices, all right? I'm going to go through these quick. You'll chuckle at some of them because, again, we've all done it. Grading practices, this is the big one, are usually assignment rather than standard focused, okay? And I'm going to demonstrate this. First of all, we've got 2 students, okay? This is student 1, and this is student 2 right here. That's student 2. Okay, let's look at student 1's grade book, all right? This is one unit here. And I've just kind of devised this like this is chronological. Like this is the beginning of the unit, and then we get to the benchmark unit assessment or whatever that assessment is at the end of the unit, okay? Now you can see with student number 1, he was slacking all the way until about mid-unit, right? And then by the time we get to mid-unit, we start to see marked improvement, not only in classwork, but also in assessments, And so we go through this whole unit, And the kid starts to show improvement until we get to the end. In that unit test where this is game day. This is where I'm demonstrating, I'm ready to show that I've got the content down. He got a 95%, which demonstrates to me a high level of mastery. But because this grade book is set up to put the emphasis on assignments, on stuff rather than mastery, that grade for that unit only is a 66.4. So I mean, whenever you think about this, that grade does not communicate mastery at all. It communicates work ethic and, the time it took him to arrive at mastery, but it doesn't communicate what it ought to, right? That's student number one. Now we get to student number two. Student number two, obviously this is a great kid, and there is value in work ethic, by the way. I'm not here to downplay work ethic and all that. There's value in that. But if you notice, this kid is very, very diligent, getting all their stuff done to a very high standard. But look at all the assessments. On all the assessments, this student never shows growth. So they're doing the stuff. They're going to go home. Like my kids, I've been blessed to have smart kids, but, we put a lot of legwork in at home too. Like we sit them down and we're working with them. Their stuff is going to be good. Their products are going to be good. But that really doesn't always reflect the level of mastery. So this student was very diligent all the way down, but never really reached a level of mastery. However, their unit grade does reflect a high level of mastery, 80%, a B, right? So the problem with these two approaches to assessment is that in both cases, the assessment or the grading practices are assignment focused and not mastery focused. Does that make sense? Well, let's try this one. I'm a military guy. I went to jump school. Imagine you went to jump school. Which one of these students do you want packing your parachute? Now, you might say neither, right? Well, student A got an 80%, student B got a 60%, okay? I want mine to be at 100%. Now, let's look at these two students here. Here's student A, okay? Student A, 10 weeks, pretty good student, and 4 out of 5 times of packing a parachute, they got it right consistently across the board. You got a 4 out of 5 chance of surviving this. All right, 80%. Student 2, check student 2 out. Student 2 was lost, right? Man, I'm not going to make it. Almost got cut from the class, blah, blah, blah. Finally, we get to the latter weeks of the course. Weeks 7, 8, 9, and 10. By the time we get to 9 and 10, that student has mastered it to perfection. Okay? Well, student 1 averaged an 80% in the course. Student 2 averaged a 60%. If this was your option, you had to pick one, who do you want packing your parachute?
Student B.
Obviously, right?
For the last 3 weeks or the last 2 weeks, he didn't get it.
He finally got it.
Yeah.
So, I remember being in air assault school. Air assault school was the hardest school I've ever been to. My hardest school I ever went to was air assault school. And air assault school is hard because there's a lot of math involved, and there's a lot of like time pressure, like big cargo nets. And you have to sling load these on rotary wing aircraft. But the way that the test goes is you've got 2 minutes to find the gigs on there, like the 3 imperfections. So they give you the clock's running 3 minutes, and you're like, oh, and you're just panicking and stuff. That was tough. But by the end of the course, to get that coveted air assault badge, you have to master it. Everybody goes through growth. That first couple of weeks, we're all struggling, but then we mastered it at the end. So. All right. So the second practice, the first practice that's a deviant practice is that grading is assignment rather than mastery based. The second one is that the use of zeros is punitive and absurd, structurally absurd. Now, there have been times when we use zeros here, but they're purely administrative. They're placeholders. There's a reason why at the grading periods we bump those grades up to a 60. A 60 is true failure, right? The way so it doesn't matter if they're a 0 or a 60 or not. They still fail at a 60, but what a 0 does is it makes it virtually impossible for a student to ever improve. So let's look at this. Okay, we've got 5 temperature readings, right? 85, 87, 88, 84, just like this week, right? And then one day we miss a temperature reading. So we get an average temperature of 68.8 degrees. That has no bearing on reality at all, right? No bearing. I'm not going to hit all these. They're outliers. They mathematically destroy a student's average. Consequences are supposed to be instructive and corrective in nature, whereas zeros are punitive and non-corrective, meaning you put 2 or 3 zeros in the grade book, there's virtually no way that student can pass. They may have been a slug for the first 9 weeks, but they finally kicked it in. It's too bad, so sad. You didn't have the work ethic the first quarter, so you're done. This is a parent. This is a letter that Jason Pelham received. We edited it a little bit, modified it, but it says, "Dear Principal Brown, I'm confused. My son John D. Good has 11 B's, all 80s, and 2 zeros in Mr. Bandy's class. His average is now an F, 67.7. Is that fair? 11 out of 14 is 85%. He did 85% of the work on a scale that your school handbook describes as above average. However, he received an F. Please explain." That's good. Names have been changed to protect. The use of zeros. Zeros are neither accountability tools nor motivators. We are faced with the irony that a policy that may be grounded in the belief of holding students accountable actually allows some students to escape accountability. Why? Because you give them a zero and then you move on, right? They're not held accountable. They're not encouraged or motivated. You give them a zero and you move on. They're then off the hook with a zero. All right? The appropriate consequence for failing to complete an assignment is to require the student to complete the assignment. That is, students lose privileges, free time, and unstructured class or study hall time, and are required to complete the assignment later. And the other thing we want to ask ourselves, okay, you're really, really great teachers. You're teachers that are changing hearts, minds, lives, that are inspiring kids. They don't typically have this problem. Now, you're going to have a day when a kid's like not up to it and they're not doing the work, and you're going to have certain kids that aren't going to put pen to paper. That's where you stop being an educational scientist and you become an artist and a parent. That's when you have to use the tools in your bag, the love and the logic to inspire, motivate, and find another way for you to get that feedback from. Not every kid has to do the same assignment, by the way. I can be in a classroom with 20 kids, and I might have 5 kids that are not going to do the paper and pen work. I may need to turn some kids loose, differentiate my products that I'm asking. I may need to spend some time conversing with these kids or interviewing or that is a valid way to get feedback. There's nothing sacred about everybody has to do this assignment. One thing that Allison Eisenberg does fantastic, I don't know if she's still doing it now, but historically she would do these grade menus where here's our unit, these particular products can assess this element. You pick which one you want to do, or you come up with one. Choice. Yeah, that kind of thing, yeah. So use your power. You guys are the experts in there. You guys have got the secret weapon is not the content. The secret weapon is you. Build a relationship, inspire them, make them want to. I'm going to tell you, man, I was a good teacher. One of the best ever. Not as good as her, but I was one of the best of all time. I'm not going to be shy about that. This was the best teacher I ever had ever. I don't remember one thing he taught me, but I remember, So you're the secret weapon, okay? You're the one that's going to inspire and motivate. We had Jesse Lawrence and I, kids would do stuff because they didn't want to let us down. They didn't want to disappoint us. So make sure you're using that groundwork to build those relationships. Don't use zeros as a punitive tool or as an instructional tool because it doesn't work. There's no research to support it, not one bit. All right, grading on. Now, here's the thing. I'm going to say some things here now that I don't entirely believe in. I'm not a fan of the 100-point scale. We do use the 100-point scale here conventionally, right? We do it because that's what our infrastructure supports. We use Power School. And it just so happens that in most states, college reporting is based on a 100-point scale, right? So what we do at Russell Middle is we kind of tweak it a little bit to fit our purposes. We are doing standards mastery grades on a 100-point scale and formative grades on a 4-point scale, okay? So when you're doing those big unit projects or assessments, that's a 100-point scale in the grade book. Formative is 4-point scale. I'm going to go into a little bit. I'm not a fan of the 100-point scale at all. Again, good people can disagree on this. I'm teachable. I'm very teachable on this, but to me, it's just like the use of the 100-point scale is incoherent. And here's why. This is like, if a student earns a 69%, they have not met the standard. But if they earn a 70%, they have met the standard, right? What is that one vague unit of measurement that you're talking about? What is that one that they're short of that kept them from meeting the standard? Does a 70 constitute adequate performance when a 69 doesn't, really, on a 100-point scale? No one can answer that, It's just, it really is arbitrary. For all the people who are like, traditional grading is objective. No, it's not. It's completely arbitrary and subjective. A D, I like this. A D is a coward's F. The student failed, but you didn't have the guts to tell him. All right. If a student earns an 89, is it coherent to say that a student was only 1% of knowledge away from content mastery? Okay, let's do this real quick. Let's just take a second. I don't want to overthink this. But you guys are professional educators, right? You're paid to assess. Here's the test that you were given. Student completes this in your class. I want you to do this real quick. They had 30 multiple choice questions. They had 15 short answers and 5 essay questions. You weight the categories, and I want you to give this student a grade. Student missed 6 multiple choice, 7 short answer, and 2 of the essays. Missed 2 of those. Missed 7 and missed 6. You grade it real quick. Just take a minute and do that. Don't share your answers. I just want to show you something. Weigh it according to your values. Either write your answer down or type it into your phone, like in a blank text message real quick. Take about 15 more seconds. I know this is going longer. What time does this class end?
11:14.
Okay. Or just give me a thumbs up when you've got a grade here.
Remember earlier when I said I've successfully avoided math?
I know.
Yeah,
Here I am.
What is happening?
And see, and I don't.
Don't overthink it, just, real quick.
There's 50 questions total.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
But I would read the short answer. but
Well,
essay
see,
questions
I
were-
would have too.
Right,
That's what
well, that's
I'm-
what-
Yeah,
I'm
that's fine. Don't overthink it. Just
Okay.
just do what you know to do. I'm not here to
All right.
look. I've done the same thing. I'm telling you. I just want us to think critically about what we're doing.
It's okay. 24.
We only got one math teacher here who's done. All the rest of the ELA social studies teachers.
Yeah.
Oh, man, bro. Really?
I can't imagine
Right.
having kids 50
I mean,
questions.
not like that. That's awesome. Analysis.
All right, 10 more seconds. All right, Leanne, what you got?
I got a 60.
What'd you get?
So I'm still doing math.
I got a 7.
70. What'd you get?
Without like adjusting it, student would have made it 68.
68.
I stopped at 60 and I went multiple times. I don't know.
Yeah,
You do this, and we've done this before in a faculty meeting, and we had grades ranging from 85 to 60s to even below that. These are educators here.
Yeah.
The test doesn't change. The person
Right.
that changed was you. So the point is,
Yeah.
this way of doing assessing is very autobiographical. It tells me what you value. It doesn't really tell me much about the student's level of mastery. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's no inner rate of reliability there. No.
Right.
Even in this room, even before.
Should have counted more than the other two.
Yeah.
Five essay question, I mean, that's
Alright.
essay questions, come on. See, I just did mine under just a basic, just a basic.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't,
I needed that whole 30 minutes to figure it
I
out.
didn't, I had nothing.
I'll be honest.
So those are the major defects that we have encountered that we've all been guilty of. All right, the various defects have a common feature in each. Classroom or assessment practices make it difficult to accurately communicate a student's level of content mastery. Just the one thing a grade should do. But you can't beat something with nothing. What's the alternative? And the alternative is standards-based grading, where our assessing is going to be mastery focused, not assignment focused. Okay, how do we do that? Rather than using an abstract numerical scale, feedback is given in the form of information. Okay, that's what the 4-point scale is. I don't care. There's nothing magic or sacred about 4 points. I don't even like it calling it a 4-point scale because it leads us to think in terms of a numerical scale. I would rather use like a color scale, like gold, silver, bronze, or whatever. But really, those numbers are just symbols. They communicate qualitative information, not quantitative information. A 4 communicates that student on this standard has achieved mastery. At least that student could probably teach it. All right, this student is making considerable progress towards the standard. They're getting there. This student is progressing. That's made some progress. This student is making little to no progress. That's what the 4-point scale means. Okay, so we said, it's expressed in numbers. This is called the 4-point scale. I've seen there's 100 ways to cut the cake. This is not biblical, holy scripture, okay? But it's just a handy way of doing it, that's coherent, at least, way more coherent than the 100-point scale. Has no relationship to zero. The numbers are nominal, not ratio or ordinal. Well, I guess they are kind of ordinal. Again, it might be helpful to think of this in terms of color scale. And think of the reason we call this forensic assessment rather than forensic is evidence-based, right? So conceive of the classroom as a courtroom setting, where students are the advocates, the lawyers, you're the judge. You're the content expert, and they're making their case to you with their body of evidence, all right? So think of it that way. In this way, the classroom is standards focused. The classroom gradebook is set up to assess standards. Now, you guys, your gradebook should already be set up, but when we were just building this, my gradebook will look something like this. I'd have my units, and my major standard or my major unit theme would be assessed down here with my 100-point scale, and all these practices or formative grades would be graded on a 100-point scale, 4-point scale. Now, especially in ELA, it's a little difficult. There's a little more legwork that needs to be done at the front end because we're thinking standards based on grading every single standard, right? Again, there's nothing sacred about the standards either, other than that's what we're being assessed on. You can carve that up in a way that's workable for you, but what you want to do at the beginning of each unit is, or grading section, is you want to set your learning target. And that learning target is what you're going to be assessing, right? So I've got my major learning target, and ELA is kind of cyclical. There are things that you do over and over again, so you can phrase those learning targets in terms of like, at this point, students will be able to, engage or spell this vocabulary section at a basic level, and then later on at an intermediate level, and then at an advanced level. You can shape those, and we can get with the ELA teachers together, and Hannah's got a lot of insight on this, on how we define those learning targets. But don't feel like the way that the standards and the GPS are communicated, that's the way that you have to live with. Same thing like social studies. Social studies is real nice and neat. You've got a standard and several supporting elements. There are certain standards that are pretty big, like the government standards or the civil rights. So it may be that he wants to divide that up into 3 major learning targets and separate and have 3 units. That's okay. There's nothing sacred about the way that the performance standards are organized. You can reorganize them. The key is that the first thing we're doing is defining our learning target and making sure the kids understand what that learning target is. Then we're allowing them to practice those targets with no penalty. This is the hang-up for some. No penalty. Practice without penalty. It's not game night. They're not ready to demonstrate mastery yet. This is all for them to make mistakes. There's value in failure, right? We need to celebrate failure. Practice, 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 practice. And then on game day, that's what counts. That's what the standards mastery is, the one that goes into the grade book and affects their grade. So now, and I'll get to some of the counter examples, and I don't want to keep you too much longer. I'm going to give you this presentation. Let me deal with some of the clapbacks on doing it this way, because it's might answer some of your questions. Yeah, clapback. You always got something to say back. Students are free to practice without penalty. Since not all students will require the same number of practices, forensic assessment is naturally suited to differentiation. So you got, like, you're doing spelling tests.
Yes.
It may be that you got a student that doesn't need to do all those spelling tests every time. You can tell them they're writing, they got it. This student's really struggling, so they may need to do a little more. Or this kid might be on an IEP, and if you give them a 20-word spelling test, that's going to freak them out. So you need to cut that down into, here's 5 words. Yeah, so just be a good parent. That's all it comes down to, right? Since forensic assessment is rooted in practice, an evidence teacher are relieved of the burden of grading every practice. Listen, guys, when we put this out, my mind was like, well, this is going to free teachers up. Now you don't have to take all these stacks of papers. I did not take papers home, man. I mean, every now and again I took stuff home. I rated, but usually most of my assessing was being done right there in the room. It might be a little different when you're grading writing prompts and stuff like that. But standards-based grading, the value is in the formative assessing. That's the learning event, So I'm going around and assessing while the learning's taking place. I don't have to grade every single piece of paper I ever give. You don't have to do that. There's why. Why do that? I can, by grading Leanne's packet, I can probably assess her level of movement towards mastery just with a conversation, rather than looking at everything. I want her to do the practices, and I want the practices to be fun and engaging, but I'm not going to be married to grading every single little thing they ever do. You don't have time for that. It's not learning, you know. It's assignment focused, and we don't want to do that. Again, content mastery is not scorekeeping. Content mastery is much more objective. Okay, here's the clapbacks, right? Clapback number one. Like Hannah was saying earlier, what if the student refuses to work? How will they be held accountable? This may come as a shock to you, but students have been refusing to work since the foundations of the world. Human nature has not changed. They refuse to work whether you're using standards-based grading or traditional grading. This is where your power of persuasion and engagement and making those kids see the star, that's where that comes in. You have to give them something that they do want to do. You have to link it to relevance for them, build relationships. You're the secret weapon there, okay? Clapback number two. The 4-point scale is not fair to students who work hard and complete all assignments. I'm like, so sad, you know, too bad. It's not about being fair. Fair is not treating students the same way. Fair is treating students the way they need to be treated. Students are different. I've got, like I said earlier, 4 kids, they're all 4 different. The way Piper learns is, I'm gonna tell you right now, her Piper and Petra are different. Petra is mean. She's gonna be, Piper is sweet and empathetic. Petra is mean. She's a daddy's girl. I'm glad she likes me, but she is mean. You have to differentiate, guys. Differentiation is not something you sprinkle in. Today I'm gonna do a little different. Differentiation is a worldview. You differentiate as a mode of practice, right? This kid has never done it right for me. He's not. So how am I going to engage him? Usually I'm going to converse with this kid. Got to find a way to get the feedback. There is a way, okay? Forensic assessment is subjective. Oh, really? It looked pretty freaking subjective to me when we were doing the 100-point test, you know. Subjectivity is a major problem in the current grading practice, not with standards-based grading. I would much rather rely on your content expertise than on an arbitrary grading scale rooted in 0 or 100. That's subjective. This is objective. Your mastery is objectivity. You're the content expert. You can tell me if a kid's getting there or not. So this is the real objectivity, okay? Clapback number 4. Under the 4-point scale, students will have no incentive or motivation to work. Again, I've got 10 or 15 slides in here of studies that show grades do not motivate. They don't. Most kids who get good grades have some level of intrinsic motivation. And kids that are not doing work, guess what? They don't care. They don't care. So, under the 4-point scale, students are rewarded for doing nothing. Arbitrary rewards are a major concern for the current grading system. Students are often given additional points or awarded extra credit for factors unrelated to content mastery. And under the 4-point scale, wait a second. In forensic assessment, feedback is exclusively nominal. A student cannot possibly be awarded something for nothing. So there's the old thing, you know, practice without penalty. The penalty for no practice. If they refuse to practice, then they're getting a 1. They have not demonstrated content mastery. Can they change that? Yes, they can. That's why when a kid comes back and he comes and says, okay, now I've gone back and remediated. I've assessed under our model, you give 1 assessment. You can give at least 1 assessment. You give 1 after they've reassessed. It can't just be they want to roll the dice and you have to demonstrate. I would say, like, if they came to me and said, I'm ready to reassess, I'd have a conversation. Well, tell me about where we were at last time. What do we have now? I would have a conversation to see if they're ready to reassess. And then I would reassess them using differentiated means on that portion that they didn't get. If you give them that 50-question test before, they got 65% of it right, you can kind of see what elements they have. Zero in on the 0. Remember, feedback is powerful, but it's got to be targeted feedback, not general feedback. So find out where they're missing, remediate them on that, and reassess them. I'm going to have a hard time with a kid coming to me and saying, look, I've gone to Coach Gadd and I've asked to reassess, and he said I've already used up my 1. I'm going to have a hard time swallowing that. If a kid is coming to you and they've had a change of heart or whatever, and they say, I am ready, I can demonstrate mastery, but I've already used my 1 and that teacher's not letting them, I'm going to have a hard time with that. You know what I'm saying? If that kid, we're not punitive here, we're corrective in nature, we're raising kids. If that kid is ready to assess, I don't care if they spin it or not. The whole point of that reassessment policy is so you're not taken hostage. What was happening is kids were saying, I can reassess anytime, so they just roll the dice. Here, let me do it again and see if I can get a better grade. That's not the point. You manage that process. You manage the time, the conditions, and the center, but they should be given the opportunity to demonstrate mastery.
Right.
That's being a good parent, okay?
So if they say I made a 75 and I want to
I would say you're
mine has been below.
20% there. I'd say let's see where you're strong at and see where your weak areas at. Let's work on that, and I'll reassess you on that. And if you get it, boom, you're gonna get 100, or you'll get a 90. All right.
My thing is like they have to prove to me, but I don't give them anything above an A after the reassessment.
Why?
Then, I don't know. I just think it wouldn't be fair for the people that got it the first time.
It would be fair, would it?
That's how I was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See,
We're not about.
And then I think I got corrected on it, so.
Whatever they make on that
Develop,
reassessment's what they get.
Again, this is a way that you've probably never been exposed to. You probably were as a student, okay?
no, yeah,
But
I
but
was the
remember,
first group.
we're not
I think
assessing is if by fair you mean we're treating everybody axiomatically the same. That's not the right approach.
right.
Okay, we that grade needs to reflect the level of content mastery. Now you have devices and tools at your disposal to communicate things like work ethic, or if they're slugs and they're doing nothing for you, or if they're being disruptive in class. There's citizenship grades, there's discipline procedures. Then we've got a behavior issue here. But academically, if that student reassesses, he comes back and the first time he only got a 70, you're saying your reasoning is that, well, this kid got it on the first time. Why should this second assessment for this one count more? Who cares? This kid got it. It doesn't matter how it's gonna in the real world. Kids learn at different levels and paces, and this kid needed more time, or he needed more motivation, or whatever. But if he got it eventually, that grade should reflect that he got it. Okay.
I mean, it is kind of like the GACE. I mean, you can keep taking it over and over again until you finally pass it.
Listen,
Because
when
you
I went
took
to
it
my
8
doctorate work,
times.
yeah, the GACE, the driver's license test. You can take the LSATs, the LCATs, the MCATs. You can take them as many times as you want, and the highest grade is the one that's non-normative and binding.
Yeah.
When I did my doctoral work, every single class I took, I could reassess for full credit, every single one. So when people come to you and say it's not like that in the real world, I'm like, what world are you living in?
Yeah.
It's so the world I live in and move and breathe in is like that. So,
Some
we're
great.
trying to prepare them for life. Well, this is their life. They're living right now, and you're also trying to be a supportive and encouraging parent too. You're in local parentis, so just again, I've done the same thing. When I was a brand new young buck like Austin DeLay and roommate 17 years at Yale, I did the same thing. It took Jesse Lawrence and I reading and trying some things, and just really what happened for us. Really, the first thing that happened was we came across something. It was like an email or something about critical self-assessment. And we started doing our ticket out the door. It was like, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to have students rate themselves on the standard that we did that day, or the element that day on a 4-point scale, and give a short reason why. We're going to start doing that. And we started doing it. We started using that feedback to discuss with kids. And you can ask anybody. I'm not just saying this. We got to the point where not every kid was passing, but we could predict a student's level of content mastery, and we could predict CRCT scores almost to the digit. So just again, I know that's a lot that we've given you. I'm going to make this available to you, as well as the slideshow that Hannah was showing up, something that she and Michelle collaborated on. That reflects our handbook. So it's going to be a good resource to have at your fingertips. But remember, just to summarize, the way we do this is you set your learning target, allow the students to practice that target without penalty. Using your ability to inspire, engage, to practice different ways to get that feedback from them.
Mhm.
Then you assess them and reassess them after they've remediated. Okay, that's the 4 tenets of SVG. Set your learning target, allow them to practice without penalty, assess them, reassess after remediation. Those are the sacred four points.